Everyone.
Morning.
My name is Ibrahim Dogus. I'm the chair of SME4Labour. There are a few delays, and our chair, Vicky, has not been able to get through to security yet. So I'll be Vicky for about half an hour. When she turns up, then hopefully she'll take over her seat. We've got a great panel today. I'll get them to introduce themselves quickly, and then we'll start with Mike to say a few words. Introductions first, let's see.
I'm Mike Reader. I'm the Member of Parliament for Northampton South. But prior to being elected, I've worked in the construction industry for nearly 20 years.
I'm Brian Berry. I'm the Chief Executive of the Federation of Master Builders. We're the largest trade association for SME construction companies across the UK.
Hello, my name is, good morning, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Muyiwa Oki. I'm an architect with over a decade of experience. I work at a large multinational construction company called Mace, but also I'm the president of the Royal Institute of British Architects, RIBA. We are 50,000 members strong, and we campaign for good design and sustainability, a more sustainable built environment.
Okay, I'm Roger Mortlock. I'm Chief Executive of CPRE, the countryside charity, and pleased to be here with our partners at FMB to launch this report.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Mike, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, I'm also stepping in a little bit. We were hoping one of Angela's PPSs would be here today to speak to you, but I think she's stuck in the security queue as well. So some learning for Labour Party in future on how we manage crowd control at these conferences. So I want to start on a real positive, and a positive that actually centres around Northampton South. There is cross-party consensus for supporting SME house builders. And actually my predecessor, Andrew Lewer, who was the previous MP for Northampton South, the Conservative, was heavily involved in the all-party parliamentary group for SME house builders. And even in my constituency, I have Travis Perkins, one of the largest materials suppliers in the UK. So we start on a positive that actually there is support across government for supporting our small and medium-sized builders in the UK. And we know that's a good thing for the housing market. So I've worked in construction for nearly 20 years. I started as a civil engineer doing water engineering, so it's very interesting to see water being back on the top of the agenda for government. I have dusted off my master's dissertation on regulation in the water industry. I'll be handing it over to Steve Reed sometime soon. And I spent a long time working in the public sector with a range of public sector clients, including social housing providers, and more recently working globally for Mace. So we have two Mace, one former, one current Mace colleague on the panel today. No sponsorship implied. And what I've seen personally through my experience is that diversity of supply in any supply chain in construction is really, really important. And that goes the same for house building. Diversity drives speed of delivery, and we know at the moment we've got a challenge in the housing market around speed. We've got real problems still with land banking, with the scale of larger builders, and that's now being investigated by the Competitions and Market Authority about how those builders operate. And we know that large schemes generally take a long time to release, which ultimately has a big impact on those existing communities which are impacted by them. And I see that in Northampton, where we've got a large amount of house building on the edge of my constituency, and people become NIMBYs, not because they don't recognise we need the housing, but they're fed up of 5-10 years of disruption on their doorstep as a house builder slowly builds out over 1,000 to 2,000 houses over a 10 to 15 year period across a large development site. So SMEs can help with that by packaging and designing the land that we release to support SME builders. We can get more diversity and more speed. Secondly, competition. And we know in a market like housing, competition is a good thing. It's a good thing for people buying houses because it keeps control of the price. that we're all paying when we buy a house, but also it helps in terms of competition and driving businesses to be better, to be faster, to recruit the best people, to train and look after their people. And we know that if we can increase the diversity of supply, and we've seen that elsewhere in the world, where markets like Germany and others have a much higher proportion of SME house builders, we see better competition in the market, which ultimately, particularly for the public sector, will drive also benefit the public sector purse as we move forward on our mission for housing. And finally, resilience. Construction and the housing market are volatile. We've seen just this week one of the largest contractors in the UK, ISG, go into administration. We've seen in the past small and medium-sized businesses in my region, East Midlands, go into administration. It only takes one or two bad projects to take a business out in these days. And the more diversity we can get into the supply of housing, I think by far the better. So the report that I would recommend you all read is really valuable and sets out some really strong aims. And there's two I'd like to focus on in my opening remarks. We're currently in the consultation on the National Planning Policy Framework. One thing that isn't in there 100% at the moment is I am an advocate for requiring local plans to have plots identified for SME builders. I think it is a positive step that we can take to drive councils to make sure we're supporting local employers, local builders, and being someone who's bought their first house from an SME builder, I have to say, as a consumer, you generally may well get better quality and better quality of service once you've bought that house. So I support the aims of this and other organisations who have put forward that the NPPF needs to be stronger in terms of supporting SME builders going forward. I think secondly, we've seen this week the announcement on brownfield passports, for those who've missed the announcement in the press, where a brownfield site has development consent, is within design codes, and is ready to be delivered. It doesn't need to go through for planning. And actually, I think that is really beneficial for small and medium-sized businesses. We'll find a lot more smaller sites, particularly in places like Northampton, where we have a lot of brownfield sites from previous industry that probably weren't viable previously because of the long planning and consultation process those sites may have to go through. It may take 18 months to 2 years to get through that arduous process. Where there's a plan, where they're in design code, where it's a brownfield site, those builders can get on immediately. And for small and medium-sized builders, that really opens up a new market for them where they're nimble and they're able to go and react very quickly. So government is already working towards it. You know, I started by saying there is cross-party support, and I hope that does continue with the Conservatives now in opposition, that they don't lose that support for the house building market in general. And I hope, as MP for Northampton South, following on from Andrew's footsteps as the former Conservative, I can continue supporting SME builders in the UK.
Thank you, Mike. I mean, supporting small businesses across the country, especially in building industry, is key. And I hope with Mike and other MPs in the Labour Party, we will be able to keep the government on their toes. Now we'll move on to Brian Berry, Chief Executive of Federation of Master Builders.
Thank you very much. And Mike, it's great you're here. It's a shame the Housing Minister couldn't make it, given the importance of housing. But we've got a lot to discuss today, I think. So the FMB is a trade association. Most of our members are in the repair and maintenance sector, but about 10% of our members are house builders. But they are the small and micro house builders. They are typically building half a dozen new homes a year. And the title for today's Fringe event was about ending the monopoly. And I think the thing that we need to bear in mind, and the thing that is challenging me, is the fact that actually only 10% or less of all new homes are built by SME house builders. Compare that to 40 years ago when it was 40%. So what we're seeing is a decline in the local house builders and the dominance of the major house builders. And that is not healthy in terms of choice and delivery. I think we shouldn't forget actually what we're trying to tackle. We are tackling a housing crisis in this country that has been going on for too long. We should have built, since the Second World War, an additional 5 million homes to keep pace. That is the backlog we are having to deal with at the current stage. And of course, the number of social homes has declined rapidly over the last 4 years, causing problems for people on low income. In 2022, we built just 5,500 social homes. And this is obviously causing problems for people accessing housing. with the result that 1.25 million people are on social housing waiting lists. And if that wasn't bad enough, you may have seen the article in the Sunday Times yesterday. We've got 150,000 children living in temporary accommodation. So when we're talking about policy framework, the things that need to do, we shouldn't forget the people that actually we're trying to help in this country to have a decent home. So the question is, why aren't local house builders stepping up and building? Well, we carry out an annual survey of our members to find out what are the main barriers to local house builders. And our last survey last year revealed that the planning system was the number one barrier for our members, 55%. There was an issue last year about mortgage availability because of the interest rates, but the availability of land as well is a major problem for 48% of our house builders. So the government is absolutely right to have committed, made a commitment to build 1.5 million new homes over 5 years. That equates to about 300,000 a year. That's a very, very ambitious target. The last time 300,000 homes were built was in 1969-1970, and that's when government took an active role in building council houses. So the challenge is enormous, and that is why, in terms of creating capacity, you need to bring in the SME house builders. And that means really, as part of the NPPF consultation, we need to make sure that those local plans allocate small sites for local house builders. We know about the resourcing, the serious underfunding of planning departments, and it is encouraging that the government has said 300 new planning officers, but that equates to about 1 per local authority. We also need to see those planning officers engaging more with local house builders. The need to create a forum to bring local house builders to engage, improve the communication. We need to put an emphasis on quality as well. A lot of opposition to house building is because of that identikit housing that you see all across the country. We need a better emphasis on design and quality. And let's not forget, we are moving towards net zero, and that commitment needs to remain. We've got a legal target to deliver net zero by 2050. So we need to make sure that the SME house builders can be assisted to help deliver that rather than acting as a barrier. So my call is that actually house building should be in every village, every town, every city. It should be a much more organic process. There is housing demand all across the country if we're going to keep communities together, particularly those in the countryside. And the emphasis on quality is something that hasn't been lost on the Labour Party. And Ibrahim Dogus, of that great reforming government 1945-51, said that we will be judged for a year or two by the number of homes that we build, but we will be judged in 10 years' time by the types of homes we build. We must ensure that this doesn't just remain a numbers game for the government. There has to be quality homes that will sustain themselves for decades, if not centuries ahead. And so that's where the SMEs, I think, should be a key part of that solution. And to accompany that, there should be a skills strategy to make sure that we've got people coming into our industry with the right skills, rather than the skills that are set up for the major house builders, which tend to be low quality apprenticeships. We need to actually reinvigorate and bring people into our industry with the right skill set. So my conclusion is, we need to end or shake up the housing system. It needs to go wider. We need to create choice, and that means bringing more micros and SMEs. The planning reforms will go a long way, and let's put the emphasis on quality and make sure we've got the skills strategy aligned with the housing strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. I'll move on to Roger. Roger Mortlock, CEO of CPRE, the countryside charity. Roger.
Thanks a lot. Brian's nicked my Bevan quote, which is really annoying because it's my way in. He always finds a way to be really annoying. But I think we're casting back quite a lot to another mission-led Labour government in the post-war Attlee government, and I think not just for CPRE on issues like the national parks and about the formation of the green belts, and a real concentration on how we use land, but also that massive investment in housing. And I think one of the things that's interesting about the houses we built in that post-war period is they really focused on good design, on space standards, as well as something that I hope we've all got now, which is a loo inside. But But he did that quote about, we'll be judged by quality, not by the number, I think is really worth holding on to and I think plays very much to the subject we have today. And it is just worth remembering that we have one of the most unusual house building markets in the world of any developed country. When I was talking to some European colleagues recently, and they were asking about our custom and self-built, the size of our custom and self-built market, which I think is about 7% in this country. And in Austria, it's over 70%. In most parts of Western Europe, it's over 50%. And why is that important? It's important because, as the CMA, people have already referenced the CMA report, and we quote in here, even the CMA are talking about higher than expected profitability. You've got most larger house builders making a profit. It's one of the few markets where you're guaranteed a profit in the system. So before you even start, you're guaranteed a profit. But you've got house builders you've got big developers taking 140k a unit in many parts of the UK when we're facing a massive housing crisis on the grounds that Brian described. They've also been in charge of drip feeding a market. They talk widely not releasing homes, not because in the middle of a housing crisis, because they want to keep their profits high. The identikit design, I think you go through the market towns of much of the UK, you'll find exactly the same houses on the outskirts, land-hungry homes of identikit design that don't tackle the climate and the nature emergency. We can build zero bills homes now. There's one just outside there. Why aren't we making that mandatory for every home that's built? And these homes also favour greenbelt development. So even if a large volume developer has got brownfield sites in their portfolio, their eagerness to focus on greenfield sites, because that's where the profits are highest, remains. So I think we need more disruptors, and that's why we're really pleased to be in this room with FMB today. FMB are definitely a disruptor. They've got disruptors written through them, I think. There needs to be others. We need to embrace the energy from communities that comes in community land trusts, and I think every time I come to conference I'm always encouraged by the energy of the CLT movement. We need to be thinking about the role that modular builders could play. We've got to tackle this challenge at speed, and why is it that probably Orkney and Shetland seem to have embraced modular building? We need to do that much more widely across the UK. We do need to embrace custom and self-build. That doesn't mean that things don't have a kind of identity. Bath was built on a custom-built model. There's a way to do this that we can bring quality back into the market, and as well, we want to see a massive boom in council-led social homes. If we're facing into the real challenges of the housing crisis, then we have to face into the fact that we're dealing with a problem that is largely around providing genuinely affordable homes. So we need to redefine what affordable homes means. 80% of £500,000 is not an affordable home. That's and that's and even then that's being reneged on. There's a particular rural challenge. There's some great work out this week just showing that the rural economy is the sleeping giant of the British economy, worth between 9 and 19 billion pounds in tax revenues if we were to realise its potential, and at the moment underperforming compared to many urban areas. And I think just in terms of, the housing crisis is not just something that happens in our towns and cities. We've seen a 40% increase in rural homelessness in the last 10 years. We've got 300,000 people on waiting lists for social rent homes in our rural communities. The crisis is more hidden in rural areas, but it's just as acute. We've also got to accept that in many of the tackling the housing crisis in many of our villages and smaller towns needs SME builders to make it happen. We're often talking about single finger numbers to make that happen. Often those are numbers of affordable homes and social rent homes that have massive public support within those villages. You're adding 10, 20, 30 homes onto most towns and villages is something that's got public support and can be a winner. But I think there's something really important to us at CPRE about the land use decisions that kind of come from the market that we have. So if we've got a market that favours greenfield development, it means that we've seen this massive crash in brownfield development numbers and an increase in greenfield development numbers. So the brownfield target, the brownfield passports, brilliant idea. Let's have brownfield targets. Let's have targets for social rent, and let's have targets for genuinely affordable homes to sit alongside that.
Thank you, Roger. Just got a message from one of our speakers. She's also in the queue. Entrance seems to be quite busy.
Yeah.
We'll move on to Muiva Oki, President of Royal Institute of British Architects. Then we have Steve Witherden MP, who will also say a few words after Muiva.
Okay.
And then hopefully other speakers and Vicky will join us.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's great to be here on this panel talking about this very important issue, housing. And as RIBA president and an architect, delivering the volume of homes that is necessary as that the Labour government has pledged needs to be delivered, as it's already been said, in a high quality fashion, in a sustainable fashion, so that we have the built environment which is the backdrop to everyone's daily lives, is something that we can all enjoy. And the scale and complexity of doing such a thing and to address this housing and crisis is pretty vast. 1.3 million households are on housing waiting lists, which is nearly 5% of all households in England. Too many people live in unsafe and unsuitable homes, or do not have access to any home at all. I'm a millennial in the millennial generation, and living in London, I understand, renting in London, I understand that access to homes can be quite tricky and challenging. So this must change. And to do so, we need cooperation across the built environment with the government, because house building needs to be more than just a numbers game, as Brian has said already. We need to prioritize good, high-quality design. And why do we need to do that? Because good design is invaluable. It brings both immediate and long-lasting benefits. Good design comes with engaging with the community. It comes with safety at the heart of it and accessibility. And it's not just about aesthetic integrity. And I know that sounds strange coming from an architect, but we also need to put aesthetics and beauty in the realms of what good high quality design, in the definition of what good high quality design is. And disappointingly, many new homes, like the identikit housing has been mentioned, never see the inside of an architect's design studio. And to do this, we need to actively engage with the government to demonstrate and promote the role of designers or high quality design professionals and architects in the design and delivery of new buildings and new homes. This will ensure that buildings are fit for the future, meet the needs of local people, and contribute to the net zero carbon legislation that we've all signed up to. Tackling the climate emergency is an issue that architects deeply care about and all the built environment professionals care about. And the built environment, as we know, is UK's second largest carbon emitting sector. If we are to reduce the carbon impacts of the built environment, we need stronger standards for buildings. And that's why the RIBA, in cohort with our colleagues in other built environment sectors, have been putting together and leading with the UK net zero carbon building standards. This standard, which is releasing later this month, creates a framework for measuring and reducing both the operational energy as well as the embodied energy spent on buildings. We've been working across our membership organization and across the industry to ensure that and enable the industry to measure, robustly prove how a built asset can be net zero and how it can be aligned to the carbon targets set by government. I'll leave it there for now and look forward to discussing and delving into the issues.
Thank you, Muiwa. We'll invite Steve Witherden to say a few words, and then we'll go to do a few questions and answers until other speakers arrive.
Thank you. So just as an MP in a rural constituency, we need to get building. We need to get building again, house building in rural constituencies. There are problems, whichever side of the spectrum you want to look at. Whether you want to look at social housing, private renters, people looking to buy, the problems that they face. A myriad. Waiting lists for the former, and costs for the latter are obscene. But both are obscene. We can only tackle that by building more houses, by building more homes. It's just supply and demand, isn't it? The more houses that we have, the costs, the prices will go down, and that's what I would like to see, and what many others would like to see. Hopefully, everyone assembled here today. Absolutely shocking statistic we heard a moment ago. I didn't catch if it was 14 or 40% increase in rural homelessness in the last 10 years. Was it 40?
Yeah, 40.
That is absolutely horrific, and that's a statistic that I wasn't familiar with. So I find that absolutely appalling. I think as well, I'd like to echo what my colleague, what my fellow MP said a moment ago as well, is talking about the need to take local communities with us. I think he used the word NIMBYism. I think people do, certainly in rural constituencies, people do have genuine concerns about big building projects in close vicinity to where they live. And the implications, like he talks about timescales and disruption caused to their lives. So I think it's always important that we take local communities with us. But I know that the panel are like-minded on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Our speakers haven't arrived yet, so I'll move on to questions and answers a bit. And when the speakers arrive, we'll ask them to speak as well. Got 2 questions so far. Gentleman on the right. There's a microphone coming to you now.
My question is for Brian. We spoke before the election about the sort of situation in terms of putting pressure on both the government then and what was then the opposition Labour Party. Make the case for small builders essentially. You said that the quality of engagement from Labour and opposition had been quite poor, and actually it had been a little bit better back when Corbyn and McDonnell was sort of in charge of the party.
It was.
I was wondering now after the election whether you felt like that quality of engagement had improved now that they're in government. Do you feel like Labour's more engaged with small builders, or do you feel like there's still work to be done there?
Well, we were expecting the housing minister, but he's not here. So, not giving a very positive message. What concerns me is actually in terms of Labour's policy, it's absolutely right to focus on the numbers, but actually we need to make sure that we're building the right type of homes. And what are we going to do about council house building? Is that something that your Labour's going to commit to?
Well, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the minister, so okay. I think that it'd be best to take up that question with him.
Right, okay. So it's ongoing, I'd say.
So we'll take the second question.
Yeah, I think Tom Reynolds from the Background Manufacturers Association. I think the points made about the needs to increase SME house building are very well made by the panel. But I fear a barrier to that will be skills. I know, Brian, we talked a lot about skills shortages in the retrofit market during the pandemic. I don't think we're any further along with encouraging people into the construction trades. Is that a barrier to SMEs increasing the number of homes that they're able to produce?
Yeah, so we've had for some time now a skills crisis in the building industry, particularly of the trades. We know from my members that all the trades are in short supply. The CITB, the Construction Industry Training Board, has said they need another 250,000 people to come into our industry. This is going to hold back delivery. This is a major problem, and I know Labour is setting up Skills England, but it's going to take 9 to 12 months to set this up in terms of the framework. It takes time to train people, and my worry again is this emphasis on quality, because the major house builders will go for boot camp training, short-term apprenticeships, because they're training people to do one particular skill. We need quality people, and that's where we need to promote a career in construction. So we need those proper 2-3 year apprenticeships to make it attractive for people to come into our sector. So again, it's this emphasis on quality rather than just numbers. And I think as the Labour government progresses, the pressure will increase on the government in terms of delivering 1.5 million, but it mustn't be at the expense of quality.
We have 3 more questions. Take the lady here. Shall I take 2 more questions and then we do the panel?
Okay.
So, gentleman in the front.
National Federation of Builders. SMEs train 8 into construction apprentices, making 90% of the training capacity. So unless you unlock their opportunities, you're not going to succeed. And I understand Labour is still disputing in this, so they're nice builders, but do we need a change in the way that the planning system works? Because currently, you're like at a minor size, which is 10 and 10 of those major. Do we need a medium-sized site definition to enable more SMEs to be part of the strategy itself?
I'll take 1 more question before we go on to the answers from gentleman at the back. Yourself?
Okay. Hi there, Will Hurst from the Architects Journal. Right. Just had a question about how 1.5 million homes can be delivered within our carbon budgets. Various academic studies have shown that is not possible using conventional building techniques. And I'm talking about the carbon footprint of steel, aluminium, cement, etc. The Environmental Audit Committee in the last Parliament found that we needed to move in a big way towards circular economy solutions on things like this, so much more refurbishment and retrofit rather than new build. Obviously there is a balance to be struck. So what does the panel think about that? How can that be enabled by government?
Thank you. I'll take 1 more question and then I will move on to the panel to make comments. Lady here.
Hi, Sarah McGonagall from Cycling UK. We really support calls from the FMB. We really support calls from the FMB and CPRE to think about quality, not just numbers in terms of house building. But thinking about the new towns specifically, how can we ensure that new towns are built in a way that doesn't bake in car dependency, and that we can actually create healthy communities where people can get around through public transport and active travel?
Thank you. If we start with Brian and then Weaver, then Roger.
So taking the first question about new towns, there were 2 questions there. So it would have been nice to have been consulted about new towns. It would have, bear in mind we're talking about builders in local communities. We want to create towns that meet the needs and reflect society. I think that is missing a trick. I mean, there's some really good people on the task force, and I'm not knocking that, but it would be good to have had a representative from the SMEs. Again, I feel there's a danger of repeating the same mistakes over and over again. In terms of placemaking, yes, we need to create towns and that are actually, in terms of geared up for low carbon, that actually enables people to walk, access facilities. So all of that needs to be factored in, which is why, if we were on that task force, or someone was from the SMEs, we could have fed that into the task force. There was the issue about 1.5 million new homes and how we're going to deliver that. And refurbishment, fantastic. We should be doing a lot more on this. And that's why I'm really keen to hear more about the 5 million homes to be retrofitted. Because actually, repurposing our existing building stock is a much more environmentally and sustainable way going forward. But we need to put those incentives in place to make sure it stacks up economically. For example, it's 0 VAT on new build, 20% on refurbishment. That doesn't seem quite right. Maybe another one to take back. I think I'd like to see a stronger emphasis on retrofit as well. And I think, yes, I'll let the others chip in.
So I'll start from the bottom up. So quality, Sarah, you talked about quality. And I think, yes, we have been engaging as an institute in the built environment. We've had an introductory meeting with the chair of the new task force, new towns task force rather. And one thing they're really engaged in is definitions of what high quality is, and they've committed to continue that engagement with the built environment industry, including ourselves at REBA, to help them define what they mean by the things that they're going to be advising on. So another thing that we discussed was bringing to light the areas in which these new urban extensions, the site locations for these urban extensions will be. And I think they're very, it seems to me, on the outside, that they're very engaged in trying to deliver. And I know they probably haven't discussed with the entire the built environment, but I think there's this willingness to engage with the built environment, all from design to delivery, to ensure that they're delivering in the short space of time that they have allocated themselves. And then moving on to the 1.5 million homes in our carbon budget. Again, that is where the UK net zero carbon building standard that I talked about earlier in my opening remarks comes into play. This is a industry-led standard, and it's the industry leading the way in understanding what targets we need to be setting ourselves. And it's a standard that goes above all, like the REBA standard when it comes to 2030 climate challenge. It sort of conglomerate and puts together REBA's, RICS, and other standards into one framework for delivery. And then, yes, it then tells you that, if you want to do X, you have to think about Y. And we'll see a pilot later this year, and it's a standard that continues to learn from itself, because, as you say, some best experts have said that our carbon budgets we're seemingly exceeding our carbon budget. So I think all-round framework in which the built environment works when it comes to designing buildings is necessary, so that we all singing from the same hymn sheet, and we're calculating the same way, as opposed to doing it in a sort of ad hoc, differentiated way. And then the planning system. I think, yes, we have been also engaging with the NPPF consultation, and the deadline is later tomorrow.
Yes.
And yes, we do see there are some changes that is necessary in the planning system when it comes to shaking up, welcoming in ways in which we can deliver at the scale that is necessary. And I think one of the major wins is about this focus on beauty, and we know that has been a hindrance in terms of NIMBYs, and like the MP Mike Reeder said earlier. And I think if we put beauty in the round of high quality good design, aesthetics is one, beauty and aesthetic is one, sustainability is another, accessibility is another, and it's good to see that the government, the new government, is listening to the industry to understand how they can revamp planning. So I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, no, I've got a friend with whom I play top trumps on urban design maps and my two favourite categories in that game are how much of our towns and cities are devoted to surface car parks, and the extent of those. I think Stevenage came up in the 30s. So when you begin to think about what does a post-car world look like and how are we properly planning for active travel, we're not doing very well at the moment. And in places like York, where they've taken the cars out of the city completely, we've come into culture wars that we need to face head on. So I think your point on just starting with the active travel thing, we've been in dialogue with Create Streets, who've done some fascinating work around this road to nowhere, looking at some of our urban extensions work, which are incredibly land hungry. You could rethink them, make them better for active travel, and cut the land they take by 2/3. So there's a different way. We need to change is on our tin in this conference. We've got to change the way we think about how we're doing things like urban extensions. But just there is no money, so that the press play on building more homes is more of the same. Now, I don't think that's good enough on the quality point, but we've also got to disrupt this market at the same time. So I get that the immediate press play option means that you're the first place you go to is scaling up the people who are delivering for you at the moment. I don't think that's good enough, because I think at the same time we've got to disrupt that market. So I think there should be a much wider diversity of people on the new Towns Task Force. It's dominated by the big players. There's some great people on it as well. There's some people who think really differently on it as well, but not enough. They don't make the balance. And if we want to disrupt, we need more people on that task force who can disrupt. And just as I completely agree on the circular economy thing. We've had a major retailer approach us saying we'd love to add a floor or two to our city centre premises, retail premises. It's just too complicated for us to do it. So there are players in the market. I think because they're retailers, they don't know how to do it. So I think there are retailers, there are players in the market who I think want to help contribute to this. We've got to make it much easier for them as well. So we've got to use every tool in the toolbox, not just the easy press play option we've got at the moment.
Yeah, we should.
Thank you, Roger. We now have Harpreet Uppal, the Member of Parliament for Huddersfield. Harpreet.
Apologies, I'm coming in really late, I think towards the end of the session. My name's Harpreet. I'm the new Member of Parliament for Huddersfield, so I've been an MP for about 2.5 months now. And I'm also the Parliamentary Private Secretary for Angela Inn and the Housing, Communities and Local Government team. So this is a very important subject. I'm sorry I've missed most of the discussions here, but I understand from a colleague you've been talking about SME builders, how we make sure. Oh, thank you very much. Fantastic. I've got something here which I will absolutely make sure I look at in more detail. But I think you've been talking about diversing the people in the system, well, so the supply in the system, and absolutely, I think this is really, really important. You've also told me that you've been talking about quality. This is something that we're looking at, with some detail at the moment. So some of you will be aware of the National Planning Policy Framework consultation that ends tomorrow. So if you've got any really important points, please make sure you make them, particularly around quality, which I think has come up, and around SME builders. So make sure you get that in there. I've got to say quality is coming up a lot. Lots of people are talking about it, and it's really, really important that we build quality homes, but also homes that are fit for the future. So we look at green energy standards. That's got to be play a really important part in the sustainability of homes. So I'm sure that's something that we'll be looking at. We'll also be doing more around brownfield development as well, and I think that's going to be particularly important about how we re-energise and reinvigorate our town centres, and that'll be playing a key part. I've got to say, Matthew Pennycutt, we've got an absolutely fantastic housing minister, and in Angela you've got someone who's really going to be pushing this forward. But absolutely, I'm here to listen. I've come at the end, so I'll make sure I get some pointers here. But in terms of diversifying the house builders, I think absolutely we need to do more work on that.
That is a key point, because I was talking at the beginning about actually over the last 40 years, the percentage of new homes built by SMEs has dropped from 40% to what is probably less than 10% today. And if you're going to deliver 1.5 million, which we want you to do, of course, but there needs to be greater choice, and you need to create capacity. We need more SMEs and micro house builders. And my worry from the FMB is that in terms of upscaling, you're relying on the volume house builders because you're very number focused, I'd like to see more being talked about in terms of quality, local choice, and about employing local people to build local homes, which is where I think we would like to see more micro house builders getting involved. So that is a concern that we share there. New towns, again, why haven't we got SME representation there? That's something you don't need to answer, but please, it does seem that the government is relying on the old levers of the previous government, when this is an opportunity to reset the agenda and bring in different stakeholders and challenge some of the current thinking about housing delivery and not relying on what the previous government did.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Built environment.
Most architects are SMEs, a lot of planning consultants are SMEs, a lot of engineers are SMEs.
Yeah.
And whilst I think the person from Arab who's an architect is great, it's a huge company.
Yeah.
They don't really do houses.
Okay. Yeah. Look, I think you're making very fair points, absolutely, and we've got things wrong in the past. There's no about it. The system. So sorry, what's that?
Now's the time.
You're absolutely right. It is the time to get it right, and we've had a very certain developer-led system, a very certain developer-led system in the past. And you're right, in terms of that volume build, it's a few companies that are doing it, and we do need to look at that, open it up, absolutely. And I'm sure I will be passing on these messages to Matthew and Angela. So yeah.
I'm afraid we have to wrap up and continue the conversation maybe outside. The next session is going to start in 5 minutes. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you.
So sorry, because I was doing a talk.